Hello, everyone. I'm back again with another campaign diary for the Ghost in the Machine. When we last left our heroes, they had just been through a bit of a day and a lot more. They had finalized their plans with Confessor Grantham. They had agreed to investigate and likely assassinate Lord Stilltower, the corrupt and oppressive lord of the town of Stilltower and the lord of the Tower of Silence. In doing so, they secured Dryden's freedom from jail and a fair investigation for his father, who is currently in prison for sedition and treason for the destruction of an airship. Shortly after that, they witnessed the resurrection of the Grand Duke of Midrim. The Grand Duke of Midrim had been assassinated, and they went to his resurrection. However, the resurrection failed. Upon the resurrection failing, a creature of the void appeared in Cragmandu and transported the party into space, into a kind of flying temple of the void. They soundly defeated a creature, a voidling, and were then hurled into space, falling for what seemed like forever. And that is where we left off. In this episode, we're going to explore some themes that are pretty complex. This episode was a challenge for me because of what I set out to do, and a lot of what would happen in the following sessions depended on what the players chose to do in this particular session. I was really playing with fire. So we're going to look at the events of this episode, and then in the analysis portion, we're going to talk about again, kind of DM plans and plot lines versus the player's choice. Almost kind of law versus chaos, really, in a lot of ways. And then we're also going to look at the difficulty of time travel in Dungeons & Dragons when you're running a D&D game. How to introduce it, perhaps how to manage it. So let's get started on this episode of The Ghost in the Machine. What was missing and when? We arrive with our party being hurled through space after narrowly defeating the Voidling, a kind of god of the void, as they are colloquially called. Not an actual god, just the creatures who reside in the void and have a high degree of control over it and are apparently incredibly dangerous. As they are falling, they don't know what to do. They have no ability to travel through space. None of them can teleport. They're level 6. They're not sure what to do. As they're falling, Sovelius hears a voice, and it says, "I am always with you, my son." And he hears the voice of his father, Fedricio. There's a burst of arcane energy, and they are transported back to Cragmandu. As they arrive, Cragmandu looks at peace. Looks like it's been a bit of time since they fought the Voidling, but the fight with the Voidling probably only took, 30 seconds, right? This is D&D, 6-second rounds. As they get their bearings, they encounter the Knights of Gleaming and, approach the bridge, the entrance to the quarters as they were staying at the Crafter's Keep. And the Knights are like, who are you? What are you doing here? And they're like, we're guests of the Duke of Narshley. And they're like the Duke of Narshley. They're like, there is no Duke of Narshley. There is only, Ursur Crick, the King of all Gnomes. And they realize that they have traveled not forward in time, but back in time. They piece together a few things. I think they can find a newspaper because the printing press was invented about 400 years ago or so in my game, a kind of magical printing press. And they realize that the year is 1193, that they have traveled back 200 years in the past. And they have no idea what they're going to do. They leave Crafter's Crag and find a room at the Purple-Eyed Pixie Parlor, the same inn that they were staying at previously, prior to rooming at the Duke's Castle. Except for now, they're 200 years in the past. Much of this session goes on with an intense discussion on what to do, how to travel back to present day. None of them really want to be here. They're getting worried. And all the while, I'm having Gilly, every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, depending on the narrative beats, I'm having her make Constitution saving throws. And she doesn't like that. She doesn't know what's going on. But I keep asking her to do it as they're all discussing things. Sovelius has a lot of questions. He's 400-year-old elf. He's alive right now. He's like, where am I at this time? And I explain that he is in the south. He's burying his father, who has just died as a result of the end of shortly after the end of the Elven Wars, and that they are poised to be about 50 years before the Civil War, which will unite the entire country and form the final form of Gishari. they discuss what to do. They discuss, what are we going to do? How do we travel back in time? Do we, what is time travel in this world, and what is the research say? Gilly is a lore bard, and she basically knows that time travel is very experimental. Even the most powerful mages in history haven't really written much about it, and so they really are at wit's end. And then their minds turn to Lord Stilltower. And they're thinking, well, he's still alive. We know that he's a couple hundred years old. Gnomes live to be, about 500. This one probably much older. And where is he at this point in time? We could take him out now. Kill him when he's a young pup and hasn't made all the deals and research and whatever he's been doing. And half the party's for it, half the party's kind of not. They're all wrestling. They're like, we don't know the side effects. We could be dealing, if we kill him, we could be dealing with someone worse. Will this create a paradox? We need to, walk very gingerly here. Oh, and when they fell from the void, a void diamond landed in front of Sovelius's face, and it just very, gently whispered to him, Sovelius. And it kind of keeps saying it periodically to him. So it looks like the voidling has died in a crystallized form and is now with Sovelius, because Sovelius picked up the diamond and took it with him. As they're discussing all of this, they hear a voice, and it just says, Sovelius Anastasia, the once prince of the Aramir, my first, best, and last customer, my most prized and hated. And they're all like, what? And they all turn, and they see a very odd-looking creature, almost impossible to describe. Small, beady eyes, wide mouth, pink skin, jagged, sharp teeth, wearing kind of beige robes, having a large sack, a very futuristic-looking gun, a energized scimitar, a harpoon. Just a very strange creature. This is a Folk of Lang from Tome of Beasts, which is a book I cannot praise enough for its work. Cobalt Press, Tome of Beasts. You've got to get it. I've gotten so many ideas and used so many creatures from there. And this is a Folk of Lang. And so I took the idea of the Folk of Lang and kind of ran with it. I don't know much about what it means in like the Midgar setting or anything, but I know what that kind of idea means to me. So the Folk of Lang in my campaign are organized into the Lang Consortium, a kind of extra-dimensional, trans-chronological, massive organization that deals in space travel, time travel, and a magic item trade, and all sorts of business dealings. And Sovelius just is like, I'm like, who are you? And so they talk to him, and Midgar Lang explains, in the future, you and I, you are my customer. You are a platinum level member, a platinum level customer of the Lang Consortium. And they're like, oh, well, okay. And they have a lot of discussion and conversation with Midgar Lang, and he explains to them that as a condition of your membership, you have time travel protection. You are insured to where if you ever sent back in time or find yourself lost in the timeline, they will come and get you and bail you out. He says, I'm willing to do this for you, or I can leave you to your devices. It's up to you. And so now the party's caught. Do they try to kind of get themselves out of this mess, or do they take this bailout? Do they take this way out and say, forget all this craziness. We don't know what's going to happen. Even if we manage to kill a younger Lord Stilltower, we don't know, what's what, who's who. Let's not cause any paradoxes, quantum leaps, whatever it might be. And, my players are all sci-fi nerds, so they're taking this issue very seriously, a lot more seriously than I thought they would, and we'll get to that. After much discussion and deliberation, they decide they're going to travel back to the present day and deal with things there and just forget this whole mess. And as they're about to decide that, they see shifting figures. And I used Aeonic Drifters, again, from Tome of Beasts. Cannot praise it enough. Go out and buy that book now. The Aeonic Drifters fight them. It's not a very challenging fight. Midgar Lang helps them in the fight. He's got a laser pistol, which none of them actually asked about, which I thought that was interesting. He's throwing, not void grenades, but some kind of psychic energy grenades. He's got his etheric harpoon and that kind of thing. So he's a capable combatant. He's a space-traveling guy. He's not worried. They easily subdue. Sovelius has this really good moment where they're all swarming Sovelius. They're all trying to attack him with their time warp staffs, and they're duplicating and things like that. Sovelius basically baits them all into gathering. Justice runs up, Justin attacks one of them, and then Sevilius says, hold my hand. They link arms, and Sevilius casts Thunderstep, and he got 25 points of damage out of 3d10s and just annihilates most of the Ionic Drifters. The fight resolves, but partway through the fight, one of the Ionic Drifters smashes Gilly in the stomach, and she releases a torrent of icy energy in a massive area that blows over the tables, breaks the wine bottles, and does 2d4 damage. And this keeps happening all through the fight. And she's just... a horrid winter is surrounding her, and her skin is turned icy blue. Because remember, I've been having her make Constitution saves this whole time. Once that's resolved, the winter eventually subsides. They all kind of back away, and the winter eventually subsides. The conversation basically goes, someone goes, what do you think's wrong with her, Midgar Lang? And Midgar Lang goes, you've never seen someone from the land of the cold unending before. And Gilly goes, oh, I'm not from the cold unending. I'm from Bridgeton. I'm a halfling from the Glide. I'm an O'Shea. And he goes, that's great, but you're also, you're from the land of the cold unending. I don't know what to tell you. And I think she presses him for more information. He goes, what am I, the cosmic travel guide? And he actually kind of is. So they all agree they link hands with Midgar Lang. They transport out of there. I think Dryden picks up 2 bottles of wine, and he's like, these will be, they will age 200 years. I'll sell them for a pretty profit. But I think we determined that they were shattered by the horrid winter that surrounded Gilly. They're back in the Overlook, and it looks properly freaking destroyed by the Void Blast, and they're standing at the edge of a precipice, kind of where the altar used to be. They're on the edge of that, and they look down and can see the Great Span Sea. They are... the Knights of Gleaming see them and say, oh, there you are. We thought we had lost you, that kind of thing. And Midgar Lang transforms into the captain of the Knights of Gleaming when no one's watching, and basically just says, go on about your business. I've got this. They also negotiated that they would buy magic items from Midgar Lang, but he's kind of, once they're back in the current timeline, he basically doesn't have much for them. He's like, I've got this sword, which is his literal sword. He's got an etheric harpoon, and none of them are all that interested. Selena ends up buying the psychic scimitar, and that's where that is. They reconvene in the Hall of Invention and talk to the Countess of Avamere, Eximitor Callie, and the Duke of Narshley. They inform them, this has been a few hours now, they inform them there are about 2,000 people missing, that the void ruptured through the town, assailed the keep, assailed Maeza's shop, kind of swam through the town, and then took off and headed east towards Droska, best that anyone could tell. And they're like, so wait, this is something that's alive? And they're like, well, we're not sure. And so no one's quite sure what this all means yet. Gilly has used prestidigitation to kind of gently disguise her face, put up basically the equivalent of makeup on it, because her skin is now an icy blue and it's staying that way. Parties all reconvene in their own locations. Morgan stops Gilly and stops Justice on their way back to the room and basically says, Gilly, you should come to my chamber tonight. We should do some acquainting. Corin and Corian have told me so much about you. Justice, she also invites Justice. She's like, I've never hung out with a Warforged. And he rebukes her. And she goes, okay, fine. And then he's like, well, maybe I should come along. And then she goes, no, darling, the time has passed. I invited you, you declined me. Let's not make this awkward. Gilly and Morgan and Corwin have a chat. Gilly explains to them most of the details of what had happened in the Voidling fight, and she leaves out the time travel bit, I'm pretty sure. They're not telling anyone about time travel. They're telling people about the Voidling fight, but they're not talking about time travel. So Gilly talks to Morgan about the Voidling fight, and Morgan says, well, I actually know quite a bit about the Void. My mother, Agnes, taught me a lot. She's the one who taught me my arcane talents and my magic. And, as most people believe, the elves fled into the material plane to escape the Void. But whenever the elves managed to do that, she says they brought part of the Void with them. And she's like, a lot of people don't believe that. They think the Void is elsewhere. But it's definitely here in Edda, in the prime material plane. Corwin falls to sleep, and it's just Gilly and Morgan in the dead of the night, talking alone. And Morgan then propositions her. And Gilly / Alexis later tells me that she thought Morgan was coming on to her. I was like, well, Morgan's just she's kind of just, that's just how she is. That's how she comes on. But she wasn't propositioning. She wasn't propositioning you. She was propositioning you. she says, Gilly, I know more than I let on. She's like, I know a lot about your family, actually. She's like, I'm from Falglen Loch. I'm from near Bridgeton. And I feel very close to you. And while I can't tell you everything, I'd like us to be friends, Gilly. I'd like us to, build a relationship and become closer over this time. We'll be traveling together. I see no reason why we can't, be friends. She's like, I know you're missing part of your hand, Gilly. She's like, you wear that glove, but I could smell it the moment I met you, and I can see your skin is blue. I can see you're going through changes. And when you see your mother in Bridgeton in a few days, she's not going to be happy, and I can give you the means to conceal it. And Gilly says, I was told that this kind of thing couldn't really be healed by normal magic, and Morgan pulls out a ring. She says, I offer this to you as like a token of friendship, so that we may get to know one another. And Gilly goes, why are you giving me this? Why are you doing this for me? She's like, I don't grant it freely. I offer this as a token of my trust in you, and I hope that you would learn to trust me back. She grants her the moon ring, which when Gilly puts it on and attunes to it, gives her a very limited form of kind of alters a transmutation enchantment, which puts her hand back in its normal place and turns her skin back to its healthy pallor. The next morning, the party awakes to find a magical flying letter addressed from Erky, which says, Erky Timbers from Still Tower, which says, please come help. Lord Still Tower has taken more hostages. I think he's attempting to finish the ritual. Please come help. You can reply to this message. That's where we ended the episode. That episode, so much of what happened, it was a very talky episode. There was a little fight just to kind of introduce the idea of time travel, and just to kind of, and that was me using kind of an action beat, right? A fight to introduce an aspect of the lore, but also just to make sure people got to roll dice to kind of, keep things going. And I know I kind of railed against that in my last video, but my point was that action beats are okay as long as they're doing more than just being an action beat. I think the biggest challenge for me when planning this episode, as far as my sides as a DM planning it, is time travel. I really had to wrestle, and I'm still wrestling with the idea of, is time linear in my world? And if so, what does that mean? And had they chose to go, I had the whole plot planned out where they could go to Swan College and they would encounter Still Tower and they would see more of his past. And I was ready and prepared to launch into that storyline, but I was also ready to give them an out. I think I was giving them an out, and I was giving myself an out. I was giving them the opportunity to back away from this crazy idea I planned, which is time travel, because I think that the time travel in Dungeons & Dragons presents a serious problem. Probably not as serious as I make it out to be, but it sure seemed very serious when I was planning as a DM, right? So, had they went and tracked down Lord Still Tower, they would have found him as a younger man at Swan College. He was training to be a bard, and alongside him, in the same graduating class, was Examitor Callie, who was not an Examitor and who was not a priestess. She was also training to be a bard at the time. Remember, in the resurrection ritual, it was very musical. She had a choir, she did a kind of dance. It was very songstress-esque. That's how she performs her magic, because her classic training is as a bard. They were both there as students of the Bard College. And my basic plan went like this. They were going to go to Swan College, not to track Still Tower down, but to do research. And while at Swan College, they would have seen young Putris Still Tower, as Petey Still Tower, as he is called, there in the foyer/common room, and he would have been there talking to Examitor Callie and confessing his love to Examitor Callie. She would have more or less rebuffed him. They would have at that point maybe killed him, or maybe not, I don't know. But had they killed him, he would have died. And then, based on a sort of sequence of events and the decaying sanity and energy of Gilly, they would have been kind of thrusted into traveling forward in time through a certain kind of ritual with the Void Diamond. So, and once they would have arrived back in the current timeline, they would have received a note that from Erky that Lord Still Tower has taken hostages and he is attempting to complete his infernal ritual. And then they would have realized that even though they murdered Lord Stilltower 200 years ago, he was still alive. And then my idea was once they went to confront him, they would have learned that they were the reason, in a way, they were one of the reasons he became what he became. They were one of the reasons he gave in to the Tower of Silence, and there would have been, it would have been this lesson about our people are who they are. And, you know, are we determined? Is our fate sealed? Or is it the moments that we choose? And I don't think that storyline would have provided an answer. I think it only really would have provided questions. And by questions, I mean the questions of memory and identity and destiny, but also questions about how time operates in my setting. And those were pretty monumental questions to be asking at level 6, but those are the kind of questions that I'm interested in asking when we're playing Dungeons and Dragons together. It's how I've always ran my games, it's how I have fun, and it's my players have always had fun through all the years that I've done this. I was definitely intimidated by the prospect of time travel in my Dungeons and Dragons narrative, but it was something I couldn't part with. It was a storyline that every time I wrestled and revisited where they were going to land after sending them to space, I couldn't part with the idea that they were going to be sent back 200 years. And I've learned over the years to trust my gut and to trust my players, and it worked out fine. But when we talk about questions, apart from memory, identity, and destiny, the question of time travel in my D&D game now almost stands at odds, but not really. So in the potential story that I laid out, what I think I was saying there in regards to time is that time, and I don't know a lot about time travel and time, science fiction. What I think I was saying was that time is essentially linear, right? That Lord Stilltower is who he is because of events that had already happened, and he already knew who the party was. I remember in a previous episode, he had came into the inn and saw them, and I remember setting up this moment that he just stared at them for a very long time, because he was seeing, again, his murderers from 200 years ago, and the people who compelled him to be the way he is, at least from his perspective. And when they go to confront Stilltower in the present timeline, I was going to have him say, "Imagine my shock. Imagine my horror when I saw the perpetrators of my murder 200 years ago walk into my inn in my town." And that was the impetus for why he was trying to finish the ritual so quickly. But that didn't happen. They bailed out. They went with Midgar Lang back to the present time. So now, time is still potentially linear in my setting, but it wasn't established the way I thought it was, right? So when they choose not to murder him, that storyline isn't real anymore. That potential storyline, I don't have to face with. I'm only telling you the potential storyline because of the nature of the campaign diary, but it's not established in game. There's no sense that was real, and that was what happened. Stilltower did love Callie, and he obsessed over her, and she did break his heart, and that was one of the reasons he left the Bard College. But that isn't the same as the other part where they come in from the future and murder him, and he gets resurrected by his mother, Viscera Stilltower, and then goes on to be the Lord of the Tower of Silence. Those aren't the same. So instead what we have is still, I guess, a linear timeline in a lot of ways, because they have essentially went back in time and did nothing, and Stilltower was still the same way he was. And I remember I posed to them when they did it, I was like, man, I think if it was me, I would have chosen to take him out. I would have tried to save those people. And they're like, well, we don't know, what would have happened. And I kind of secretly did, but I was kind of goading them in a way. But I was like, so if I'm a player in my campaign, I don't know these things, right? And I don't have any sense of time travel and science fiction and things like that, because those things don't exist. Those narratives and those novels don't exist in Edda. There's no culture of, long established time travel writing to pull upon. There's no time machine novel. There's nothing like that. So If I attempt to interface with it honestly, I think I would have chosen to track him down and then been served the bittersweet ending that I would have so richly deserved, apparently. But they didn't do that, and it's absolutely fine. Because, in essence, even though I think time is still linear in my world because of those events that happened, in essence, we kicked the can down the road, didn't we? We don't have to answer those questions in any meaningful, confrontational kind of way yet. So, because the nature of time travel is still left ambiguous in a lot of ways, I think from the perspective of the party, at the very least, and even from my perspective at this point, we kick the can down the road. We don't have to answer those questions at level 6 with all the other exhibition going on. And so while I think that I wanted so desperately to have that bittersweet ending where the party realizes they were complicit in the death of the citizens of Still Tower and the his fall from grace, that the alternative where I gave them an option to be bailed out and they took it was just as good, because we get to have a taste of the possibilities of the world and time travel and what it all means, and that gets to be rolled around in our heads for future storylines. And we don't have to have this potentially hard and fast answer about time and the nature of being and all these things. We only have these questions to wrestle with. So I think that what I'm trying to say here is that I gave my players an out, right? I gave them a choice. And it was almost like a manifestation of the same turmoil that I was experiencing in this timeline episode. That although I felt compelled to construct this storyline, I couldn't decide what it all meant. And so I put that in the world and trusted my players that no matter which road they took, it would be okay. And as it turns out, I was right. And I think the biggest takeaway from what was missing in Win is be willing to take the risks, be willing to go there, and at the end of the day, trust your players and let them choose, because they're much better at this than you are. I remember that Justice said, can I get a DM inspiration for being right? Once I revealed to them a little bit of the details about Swan College and where Still Tower was. I go, Chase, there was no right or wrong in this episode. There were only choices to be made. So that was the episode, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. I'll put my Twitter down there in the description down yonder. And thank you so much. I saw that in the last episode, people watched it and then went back and watched the other videos. I'm sorry that the other videos are really long, but just watch them bit at a time. I'll try to do like a total recap somewhere down the road, a very overall sketch of the story. And yeah, and I hope that helps people catch them up to speed. I might have some exciting announcements coming down the road. We're going to hold off on some of those, but just be on the lookout for things on here and on my Twitter. Thank you so much. I love doing these videos. The next episode, we will see the party travel to the town of Still Tower and confront Putris Still Tower once and for all. And we are going to see one hell of a boss fight. It was absolutely riveting. I'm going to do my best to describe it the best I can, but most of that video is going to be, I think, I'm going to call it the anatomy of a boss encounter, / the Lord of Still Tower. And I'm going to break down for you how I constructed this very powerful and very lethal boss for a level 6 party and the limits of power in D&D 5th edition and how powerful your characters are when they have all the resources and ability to plan. And that's going to be the next video, so be on the lookout for that. I hope to have it up in the next couple days. So thank you so much, and I will see you next time in the wonderful world of Edda in the Ghost in the Machine.